Today was Rosh Chodesh of, and we've entered the intense period of Avelus for the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. And I would just like to spend a few minutes talking about that. You know, the entire year, the Haftarah that we read on Shabbos always relates to the Parsha. So the Haftarah picks up some theme from the Parsha, except for the Haftarahs of the summer, starting with the 3 weeks and going until Sukkot. The Haftarahs relate to the season. So the Torah brings from a medrash from the Psikta that we have Klasa de Puranusa. We have 3 Haftarahs of calamity. Those are the 3 Haftarahs we read during the 3 weeks. Then we have Shivat Nechemta. We have 7 Haftarahs of consolation, comfort. The first, of course, is the Haftarah of Shabbos Nachamu, Nachamu, Nachamu Ani. The last is the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, Sais Asis. So there are 7 Haftarahs of consolation. Then we have Tarti de Tiyufta. We have 2 Haftarahs that relate to Tshuva. So which are the 2 Haftarahs that relate to Tshuva? So our custom is to assume that this is a reference to the Haftarah of Tzom Gedalia and the Haftarah of Shabbos Shuvah. So on Tzom Gedalia we read the Haftarah, which we really read every time as Tzibur. Dirshu Hashem b'yimatzo, seek Hashem when He is to be found. Now again, although that's the Haftarah for every time as Tzibur, it has a special poignance during the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, on Tzom Gedalia, because Chazal say Dirshu Hashem b'yimatzo, to seek Hashem when He's found, refers specifically to the days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And then the Haftarah of Shabbos Shuvah, the Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is the Haftarah of Shuvah Yisrael Ad Hashem Alekecha, from the Navi Hosea. The Navi charges us with the obligation to repent. So it comes out that almost a quarter of the year, the Haftarahs don't relate to the Parsha, rather relate to the season, which seems to imply the following, that we tend to think Goyish. We tend to think set the pattern of our lives to the secular calendar. So we tend to think that the school year ends in June, and then we have summer vacation, and then a few weeks before Rosh Hashanah we get back into the swing of things, and that's Chodesh Elul, and somehow our summer vacation is, I don't want to say ruined, but it is interrupted by this 3-week period that kind of interferes with our plans. But the truth is that Chazal are telling us that starting from Shiva Tammuz until Sukkot, we are dealing with a continuum. There is a pattern, and everything that happens during this period relates, and therefore it's interesting that there is a deep connection therefore between the 3 weeks and ultimately the Yom Noraim. That gap is bridged by these 7 weeks, the Shivat Nechemta, that somehow are the transition from the 3 weeks of mourning to the 3 weeks to the period of Tshuva. And the question is this: the question is that really, what is the connection? If I were to ask you a question, what is the single lesson that we're meant to take out of Tisha B'Av? What are we meant to learn from Tisha B'Av? Is there one lesson that we can extract from the whole period of Tish B'Av? Well, where would we look for that lesson? Where would we think to find it? So, since we're talking about Haftarahs, we've talked about the 3 Haftarahs of the 3 weeks, and Haftarah Tish B'Av and Nechemta. Let's look at the Haftarah of Tish B'Av. Now, the Haftarah of Tish B'Av is the Haftarah of calamity. It's a prophecy from the book of Yirmiyah, which foretells the Churban. Now, obviously, you would think, I'm not an expert in Tanakh, but it would seem to me that if the Chazal selected this parak to be the Haftarah for Tish B'Av, it must be the most awful calamity describable. There would be no other Haftarah that would be more graphic and more frightening, and it is very much so. And it talks about the destruction of Yerushalayim and the Churban and the Golus and the suffering, the wailing, and the end, the last 2 verses say the following: Kayamar Hashem. So says Hashem. And this apparently is the lesson. And by the way, the custom on Tish B'Av is to read the Haftarah in the trop of Eicha. The tune of Eicha we use for reading the Haftarah, but the last 2 psukim we read in the regular Haftarah tune. It says, Kayamar Hashem, Al Yishalel Chacham B'Chachmasav. Let the wise person not praise himself with his wisdom. Val Yishalel Hagibor B'Gvurasav. And let the strong person, the mighty person, not praise himself with his might. Al Yishalel Oshir Ba'oshir. Let the rich person not praise himself with his wealth. Ki im bezos Yishalel HaMishalel. Only in this may the person praise himself. Haskel v'yadaya isi. To the extent that he comes to know the Ribono Shel Olam. Ki yimei Hashem. I am Hashem, Osa Chesed, Mishput Tzedakah Ba'aretz, who does Chesed and justice and charity in the earth. Ki ve'eloch afatzi, for this is my desire, Num Hashem. So what is the punchline? What is the conclusion after we read this entire Haftarah, which talks about Churban and calamity and destruction? You see, we tend to think that the solution to our problems is in our hands. There are some people who think that if we use tact and diplomacy and cleverness, we can solve our problems. So to that, the Novi says, Al Yishalel Chacham B'Chachmaso. The person who's very wise, let him not praise himself. You're not so smart. I don't think you're so smart. Then there are some people who say that if we spend our money wisely, if we make proper investments, people will love us. I remember that there was a magazine, I don't know if it's still around, the Jerusalem Report, still around? It was a magazine, and a magazine is printed a few days before it hits the newsstand. So there was a reporter who wrote a glowing article of how the Israelis are really going to make peace with the Palestinians through their investments. He went to the casino in Jericho, I think, the mall, and business was being done, and Israelis were investing there, and he said, and this is the future, this is really the resolution. It's not going to be military, it's not going to be diplomatic, it's going to be economic. We're going to invest the money, and we are investing money, and you see they love us, and so on and so forth. The only thing was, it was fantastic, that between the time the magazine was printed and the time it hit the newsstands over 3 days, that's when the first Intifada began. Right? So by the time people read this, you already saw how absolutely silly it was, nonsensical it was.
Literally wins.
Well, literally in those days. So the Navi tells us, like, it's how Lasher Ba'asha, if you're rich, don't think you're going to solve your problem with money. Then some people say, listen, that the only real solution is military. We're going to crush them with our superior power, with our might. So he's let the strong person not praise himself with his might. In other words, the problems are so intractable. They are so complex. They are so difficult. There is no human solution. There's no human solution to them. Not diplomacy, and not investment, and not military strength. None of these are going to help. The only thing that's going to help is Ribbono Shel Olam. And the key to having that schus is Haskel v'Yadaya, you see, the extent to which we exert effort to know him, to understand him, and to live by his priorities. By his priorities. Now, Hashem tells us, so what do I want? I do kindness, I do charity, I do justice. That's what I want. So if you live your life by my priorities, now you have a chance. That'll be the solution to the problems. And that is, after all is said and done, that is the bottom line. That is the bottom line of Tish B'Av. That what we're meant to learn from all the calamities, all the sufferings, is that there really is no human solution to the problems. There's nothing we can do to solve the problems. We need to have the merit to deserve a Kodesh Baruch Hu solving the problems. And that is what we're meant to take out of Yeshiva.
If one concludes that the problems are so great that the intention is that you recognize there's only one solution?
Well, I think that's exactly the point. The point is that you have to come to the point where you realize our utter dependence on the Ribbono Shel Olam. Now, I pointed out in the past a very interesting thing that Tammuz, the month of Tammuz, which of course is the beginning of the period of mourning, there's a very interesting idea associated with Tammuz. The 4-letter name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, can be rearranged in 12 different ways. In other words, if you think about it for a second, 4 letters, A, B, C, D, can be rearranged in 24 different ways. Imagine you have 4 spaces.
Yeah.
So the first space can be one of 4, the second space, one of the remaining 3, the next space, one of the remaining 2, and the last space, the remaining 1. So 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 is 24. But if 2 of the letters are identical, so there's no difference between hey, hey, and hey, hey, same difference. Therefore, you only have 12 possibilities. And the 12 rearrangements of the divine name correspond to the 12 months. Now, the Tikkunei Zohar says that they also correspond to various psukim, various verses in the Tanakh. The combination for Tammuz is the name Yud Kei Vav Kei backwards. Kei Vav Kei Yud. It's the name Yud Kei Vav Kei backwards, and it corresponds to the final letters of a phrase in Megillas Esther. When Haman was lamenting his misery to his wife and friends, so he was saying that Haman was telling them, Es Kvod Ashro V'Robbanov, he was telling him about his fabulous wealth and his wonderful family. He had so many children. And how the king had promoted him, and he was, other than the king, the most powerful person in the country. And Af lo hevia Esther Hamalka, and even Esther only invited me. She made a banquet for the king, and I was the only guest. Kiyemosi, only me. And tomorrow I'm also invited. So Haman was at the pinnacle of his power. And he said, V'chol zeh einenu shoveli, and all this is worth nothing. It's worth nothing. And Chazal say, when he said zeh, all this, it says, Melamed, it teaches us, that on his heart he had his financial statement. I don't know exactly what it means, but he had something that he wore that showed how wealthy he was and how successful he was, and he could point to it and said, all this, Einenu Shoveli, is worth nothing to me, right? When I see Mordechai HaYehudi, the Mordechai who doesn't bow down to me. Now this is an amazing thing. You think about Haman. Haman is fabulously wealthy and successful and powerful, right? And yet he is helpless. There is nothing he can do to stop this Mordechai from getting under his skin. And of course, finally his advisors say, no, there is something you can do. You can set up a gallows and get permission from the king and hang him, and of course we know that that also fails. But at this moment he says, all this, my children, my wealth, my power, Einenu Shoveli, is worth nothing. So, the phrase, Ze Einenu Shoveli, if you take the last letters of those four words, Ze, the last letter is a Hey, Einenu Vav Shoveh Li Yud, is the name Yud K Vav K backwards. The Yud K Vav K backwards. Now, by the way, this has a very, very interesting significance of Kabbalah. The idea that it's Yud K Vav K backwards, and that it is in the last letter, the Sofei Tavis, the last letter of a word, as opposed to the first letter of the word. Right? Now the idea of Kabbalah is like this. We know that the name Yud K Vav K is the Midas Sorachamim. It's the attribute of divine mercy. Is the name Yud K Vav K. But that's only when it's written forward, Yud K Vav K. Right? But if it's written backward, what would you think that means? It would mean the opposite. In other words, it's backwards. So it's the opposite of Midas Harachim, it's Midas Adin. And we know, of course, that Tammuz is the beginning of the time where we are, I don't want to say the victims, but we are the recipients of God's justice. This is the time of calamity, the time of punishment. So therefore, Midas Adin makes a lot of sense. So that's why it's the name Yud K Vav K in reverse. But the significance of the end, the last letter, as opposed to the first letter of a word, is also, Al Pi Kabbalah, very interesting. Now, when we talk about Midas Hadin, what does Midas Hadin mean? We think Midas Hadin means God throws the book at you. He zaps you. He shoots bolts of lightning out. So that's not what Midas Hadin is. Midas Hadin is God holds back his blessing. Midas Hadin is not. He holds back his blessing. Meaning, the world is a dangerous place. If God extends his bounty, his protection, etc., then you can survive. If God withdraws his protection, he holds back, then you fall prey to all sorts of things. I mean, Moshel Lama Hadover Doima, what is this analogous to? AIDS. Right? No one died from AIDS. No one dies from AIDS. AIDS is the syndrome where your immune system is destroyed. When you have no immune system, then you can be killed by viruses that would afflict a healthy person only in a very mild way. Right? Yeah. In other words, it's not that this is a disease which attacks you, and inflicts harm. It takes away your immunity. Once you have no immunity, you're open prey for anything. Now that's really what Midas Hadin is. Midas Hadin is God withholds. He holds back his protection. He holds back his bounty. So, well, if God holds back his bounty, then you're in big trouble, because this world is a very dangerous place without divine protection. Now, when we think about it for a second, so if Chesed, if God's kindness is God's bestowing and extending, and God's Midas Hadin is his holding back, so we understand that the first letter of a word symbolizes Chesed, and the last letter of a word symbolizes Din. Why is that? Because the first letter of a word flows into the rest of the word. It leads into the rest of the word. Right? The last letter of a word ends the word. Stop. Stop. This is where it ends. So if we're talking about God's kindness, that He extends His kindness, He showers us with His bounty, that is symbolized by the first letter of a word. If we're talking about the Midas Adin, which is God holding back, that's the last letter of a word. And I'll tell you an amazing thing. That al pi Kabbalah, there are Chodesh Gevuros, the 5 of the 10 spheros, 5 of the 10 Midas of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lean towards the side of Din. It's called the Chodesh Gevuros. There are various observances we do because of that. For example, we beat the Hoshana 5 times in Hoshana Rabbah to matik, to sweeten the Chodesh Gevuros. But the Kohen Gadol immerses 5 times in Yom Kippur to suppress the Chodesh Gevuros. So 5 aspects of Din. So it says in Sefer Kabbalah that the 5 Gevuros correspond to the 5 final letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The final Chaf, and the final Mem, and the final Nun, and the final Pei, and the final Tzadi. Those 5 letters correspond to the Chodesh Gevuros. So why is that? What's the connection that we understand? In other words, we explained that final letters, the last letters of words, correspond to Midas Adin, which is God holding back. So these 5 letters, not only are they at the end of the word, they can only be at the end of a word. Right? That's the form, right? In the middle of the word, beginning of a word, they have a different form. So the final Chaf, and the final Mem, the final Nun, the final Pei, the final Tzadi, can only be at the end of the word. So that symbolizes the most intense Midas Adin possible. So the fact that here we have the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei backward and inscribed in the final letters of words implies Midas Adin. But what is the connection between this story of Haman? In Pshuto Shemikra, the simple meaning of the verse, what does this have to do with the story of Haman and the month of Tammuz? The answer is because this that Haman realized, doing nothing finally, is exactly what we're meant to learn every Tammuz of. That Kol Zeh Einenu Shoveli, all this is worthless. Because I think I'm so smart, and I have money, and I have intelligence, and I have power, and I'm going to solve my problems, right? Kol Zeh Einenu Shoveli, all this is worth nothing. That is what we're meant to learn in the month of Tammuz. And that's what we're meant to learn in Tish B'Av. Exactly as the Torah says, Ayishal Chacham B'Chachmaso, Ayishal Gibur B'Gvuraso, Ayishal Asher B'Ashro. Not the wise person, not the rich person, not the strong person. There's no solution to the problems.
Shalom Blythe.
Take care.
Thank you for coming.
They'll fill you in.
Thank you.
Now, I just want to mention one thing that we have to know, that we read the news, right? And the problems with Eretz Yisrael and the problems of Klal Yisrael. And we think, okay, we have a solution, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to solve the problem. The truth is that there are no solutions. There are no solutions. And everyone thinks they have a solution. Everyone thinks we have the Eitzah, we're going to save the world, we're going to save Klal Yisrael, we're going to solve all the problems. It says it's not true. It says the problems are so complex, they are so difficult, there is no solution. The only solution is Mashiach coming. The Gemara says in Masechus Erechim, an amazing thing. The Masechus Erechim says there were various kelim in the Beis Hamikdash. One of them was a flute from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, and it had a beautiful sound. From the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, and it got damaged. So they decided to bring craftsmen from Alexandria that would repair the flute, and they repaired the flute, and it looked better than it looked. It seems to have been repaired, but it didn't make the same sound. It wasn't as good as it was. When they removed the repair, then the sound was restored. So as well, there was a machteshes, there was a grinder that was used to compound the ketores. And again, so it was dented, so he brought a craftsman to fix it. They said, they'll fix it. It didn't work as well as before. They removed the repair, it worked as well as before. It didn't look as good as it once did. It was dented, it was damaged, but it was functional. Right? You try to fix it, you don't want to make it worse. So the Gemara says that what does this come to teach us? It comes to teach us this lesson, that Al Yishalo Chalcham B'Chacham Asar, you're so smart. So as you think you're going to fix things. So as your repair, it might have a cosmetic appearance of an improvement, but in reality it is not any better than it was before. That is what we're meant to learn. In other words, the tsaras of Klal Yisrael are too complex, too difficult. They're really insolvable. It's only Rebbe Hashem can save us. When we realize this, then we are on the path to genuinely solving the problems. But as long as we think that the solutions are in our hands, then we're doomed. But when we come to understand that this is not where we should devote our efforts. We have to devote our efforts to haskel b'yadaya, I see, to tshuva, to self-improvement, to making ourselves better, to making Klal Yisrael better. Then we're on the right path. And that is the Shivat Nechemta. The question is, every year we go through this cycle. 3 weeks of calamity and 7 weeks of consolation, comfort. What's the comfort? Was the Beis Hamikdash rebuilt? Was Yerushalayim restored? No. So why is there comfort all of a sudden? Why are we comforted? Shabbos Nachem, right? And the answer is because if you derive the correct lessons from an experience, if you learn the right things, if you learn what you're meant to learn from an experience, then you can look back at the experience and say that I achieved what I was meant to achieve. It wasn't a waste. It wasn't meaningless. And to the extent that I find meaning even in suffering, the extent to which I can reconcile myself to it, I can live with it, I can find comfort. As we said many times, it's not the physical pain of Golus. It's not even the emotional pain of Golus. It's the meaninglessness of Golus. Right? That is the problem. Now, human beings are resilient. They can accept pain, but they can't accept meaningless pain. That is the problem. Because if we learn correct lessons, then we find nechama. If we learn the correct lessons from the 3 weeks, right? This lesson of haskel v'yadaya, you see, then we find nechama, and that leads us to the genuine tshuva, which is of course the objective of the whole thing. So the whole summer is really a preparation for the Yom Neroyim. But again, the cruel trick is that we tend to run our lives based on the tempo of the secular calendar. So again, summer vacation, it's an interruption, it's a break, we clear our heads, and then we resume in a few weeks. That really is not the point at all. The point is that we should see them as a hemshech, as a continuum. And hopefully the 3 weeks should lead to the good things that are meant to happen over the Yom Neroyim, and ultimately the solution of all our problems with the coming of Mashiach.